The escalating tensions between the United States and Iran have reached a critical turning point with the launch of a naval blockade targeting Iranian ports in April 2026. This strategic move marks a significant shift from diplomatic pressure to direct military and economic confrontation, raising concerns across the global community. The blockade is primarily aimed at restricting Iran's oil exports, which serve as the backbone of its economy, thereby attempting to force Tehran back to negotiations under stricter conditions. However, this action has also heightened the risk of a broader conflict, especially in the highly sensitive region of the Persian Gulf. One of the central points of this issue is the economic impact, as cutting off Iran's maritime trade directly threatens its financial stability while simultaneously disrupting global oil markets. Another key aspect is the strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz, a vital choke point through which a significant portion of the world's oil supply passes. Any conflict here could send shockwaves through the global economy. Thirdly, the military escalation cannot be ignored, as both nations have increased their naval presence, raising the possibility of direct confrontation or unintended clashes. The fourth major point is the failure of diplomatic efforts, as prior negotiations and peace talks have collapsed, leaving military strategies as the dominant approach. Finally, the global consequences of this blockade extend far beyond the region, affecting fuel prices, international trade, and geopolitical stability, with countries around the world closely monitoring the situation. In conclusion, the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports is not just a regional conflict, but a global crisis in the making. It highlights the fragile balance between power, diplomacy, and economic interests, and underscores how quickly tensions can escalate into actions that impact the entire world. The coming weeks will be crucial in determining whether this situation leads to renewed negotiations or further intensifies into a larger and more dangerous conflict. The economic dimension of the U.S. naval blockade on Iran in April 2026 represents one of the most critical and strategically calculated aspects of this escalating conflict. At its core, the blockade is not merely a military maneuver, but a powerful economic weapon designed to weaken Iran's financial stability by targeting the very foundation of its economy, oil exports and maritime trade. For decades, Iran's economy has relied heavily on the export of crude oil and petroleum products, which generate a significant portion of government revenue and foreign exchange reserves. By restricting Iran's ability to export oil through key ports in the Persian Gulf, the United States aims to create immediate and long-term economic strain. One of the primary effects of this blockade is the disruption of Iran's oil supply chain. Oil tankers that would typically transport millions of barrels of crude oil daily are now either being delayed, rerouted, or completely blocked from accessing international markets. This directly reduces Iran's export volumes, leading to a sharp decline in national income. As oil revenues shrink, the Iranian government faces increasing difficulty in funding essential sectors such as infrastructure, healthcare, public services, and defense. This financial pressure can also limit Iran's ability to sustain its regional influence and military operations, which are often supported through state funding. In addition to oil exports, the blockade significantly impacts Iran's broader trade network. Iranian ports serve as critical hubs for imports and exports beyond energy resources, including industrial goods, food supplies, machinery, and consumer products. With naval restrictions in place, shipping companies and international traders become hesitant to engage with Iranian ports due to the risks of delays, inspections, or potential conflict. This leads to a decline in imports, causing shortages of essential goods within the country. Over time, such shortages can drive up domestic prices, contributing to inflation and reducing the purchasing power of ordinary citizens. Inflation is, in fact, one of the most immediate and visible consequences of economic pressure. As the supply of goods decreases and the national currency weakens due to reduced foreign exchange earnings, prices begin to rise rapidly. This creates a ripple effect throughout the economy, affecting everything from basic food items to fuel and housing. For the average Iranian citizen, this translates into a higher cost of living and increased economic hardship. Businesses also suffer as rising costs and limited access to imported materials make it difficult to maintain production and profitability. Small and medium enterprises, which form the backbone of many local economies, are particularly vulnerable in such conditions. Another critical factor is the impact on Iran's currency and financial system. With declining oil revenues and restricted access to international markets, the Iranian currency is likely to face significant devaluation. A weaker currency makes imports more expensive and further accelerates inflation. Moreover, financial institutions may struggle to maintain stability as capital flows decrease and investor confidence weakens. International sanctions, which often accompany such blockades, can further isolate Iran from the global financial system, limiting its ability to conduct transactions, secure loans, or attract foreign investment. The blockade also has implications for employment and social stability within Iran. As industries dependent on trade and exports begin to slow down or shut down, job losses can increase. Rising unemployment, combined with inflation and reduced government spending, can lead to widespread public dissatisfaction. Historically, economic hardship has often been a catalyst for protests and social unrest, and the current situation could follow a similar pattern if conditions worsen. This internal pressure is, in many ways, a key objective of economic warfare: to push a nation toward policy changes by increasing domestic challenges. From a geopolitical perspective, the economic pressure on Iran is intended to force its leadership back to the negotiating table under less favorable conditions. By weakening Iran's economic position, the United States seeks to gain leverage in diplomatic discussions, whether related to nuclear programs, regional influence, or security agreements. However, this strategy carries significant risks. Iran may respond by seeking alternative economic partnerships with countries willing to bypass the blockade, engaging in informal or black market trade, or leveraging its strategic position near the Strait of Hormuz to disrupt global shipping as a countermeasure. Furthermore, while the blockade is designed to target Iran, its economic effects are not confined within its borders. Global oil markets are highly interconnected, and any disruption in supply can lead to increased prices worldwide. Countries that rely heavily on imported oil, including developing economies, may face rising energy costs, inflation, and economic instability as a result. This highlights the broader implications of economic warfare, where actions taken against one nation can have cascading effects across the global economy. In conclusion, the economic pressure exerted on Iran through the U.S. naval blockade is a multifaceted strategy with far-reaching consequences. It targets Iran's core economic strengths, disrupts trade, fuels inflation, weakens the financial system, and creates internal social challenges. At the same time, it reshapes global economic dynamics and raises the stakes of the conflict. Whether this pressure will achieve its intended political objectives or lead to further escalation remains uncertain, but its impact is already being felt both within Iran and across the world. The strategic importance of the Strait of Hormuz cannot be overstated in the context of the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports in April 2026. This narrow yet critically vital waterway serves as one of the most important LNFT oil transit choke points in the world, acting as a gateway between the oil-rich Persian Gulf and the global market. Its geographical position alone makes it indispensable, as it connects major oil-producing countries such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Kuwait, and the United Arab Emirates to international shipping routes. Any disruption in this region instantly becomes a matter of global concern, affecting economies far beyond the Middle East. The Strait of Hormuz is only about 33 kilometers wide, with designated shipping lanes even narrower, making it highly vulnerable to blockades, military activity, and potential conflict. Despite its limited size, it handles a massive volume of global oil trade, often estimated at nearly 1/5 of the world's total petroleum consumption passing through it daily. This makes it not just a regional asset, but a global economic lifeline. In the context of the ongoing tensions between the United States and Iran, control or disruption of this strait becomes a powerful strategic tool capable of influencing global markets and political decisions. One of the most critical aspects of the strait's importance is its role in energy security. Countries across Asia, Europe, and beyond rely heavily on oil shipments that pass through this route. Major economies like China, India, Japan, and South Korea depend significantly on energy imports from the Persian Gulf, most of which must transit through the Strait of Hormuz. Any threat to this passage immediately raises concerns about supply shortages, increased shipping costs, and rising oil prices. In times of conflict, even the perception of risk in the strait can cause oil markets to react sharply, leading to price volatility that affects industries, transportation, and everyday consumers worldwide. From a military standpoint, the Strait of Hormuz is equally significant. Its narrow geography makes it an ideal location for strategic control and asymmetric warfare. Iran, in particular, has long leveraged its proximity to the strait as a key element of its defense strategy. It possesses the capability to deploy naval mines, fast attack boats, submarines, and anti-ship missiles to disrupt or threaten shipping traffic. This means that even without engaging in full-scale war, Iran can create enough uncertainty and risk to deter commercial shipping and raise global alarm. In response, the United States has maintained a strong naval presence in the region to ensure freedom of navigation and to counter any potential threats. The ongoing blockade further intensifies the strategic dynamics of the strait. While the United States aims to restrict Iran's economic activities through naval enforcement, Iran retains the ability to retaliate by targeting the Strait of Hormuz. This creates a delicate balance of power, where both sides possess the means to escalate the situation in ways that could have severe global consequences. The mere possibility of the strait being closed or disrupted introduces a level of uncertainty that impacts international trade routes and energy planning. Another important dimension is the economic ripple effect caused by instability in the Strait of Hormuz. When tensions rise, insurance premiums for oil tankers and commercial vessels increase significantly due to the heightened risk of conflict or attack. Shipping companies may choose to reroute vessels or delay shipments, leading to supply chain disruptions. These additional costs are often passed down to consumers, contributing to inflation and economic strain in importing countries. For developing nations, which are already vulnerable to fluctuations in energy prices, such disruptions can have particularly severe consequences. The strategic importance of the strait also extends to global geopolitics. It is not just a passage for oil, but a focal point of international power competition. Major global powers closely monitor developments in the region, as stability in the strait is directly linked to global economic stability. The involvement of international organizations and alliances often increases during such crises as efforts are made to prevent escalation and ensure the continued flow of trade. Diplomatic efforts frequently revolve around maintaining open access to the strait, highlighting its role as a shared global interest rather than a purely regional concern. Historically, the Strait of Hormuz has been at the center of multiple geopolitical tensions and conflicts, reinforcing its reputation as a flashpoint in global security. Its importance has only grown over time as global energy demand has increased and economies have become more interconnected. In the current scenario, the blockade of Iranian ports adds another layer of complexity, as it directly challenges Iran's economic lifelines while simultaneously raising the stakes in one of the world's most sensitive maritime regions. Furthermore, the environmental risks associated with conflict in the Strait of Hormuz cannot be ignored. Any military confrontation or attack on oil tankers could result in oil spills or damage to marine ecosystems, causing long-term environmental harm. Such incidents would not only affect the local environment, but could also disrupt fishing industries and coastal communities that depend on the health of the escalating Gulf waters. In conclusion, the Strait of Hormuz stands as a critical artery of the global economy and a central UNSR element in the ongoing U.S.-Iran conflict. Its strategic importance lies in its role as a major LNFT transit route, its vulnerability to disruption, and its influence on global energy markets and geopolitical stability. The U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports has brought renewed focus to this vital waterway, highlighting how control over a narrow stretch of LBHRC can have far-reaching consequences for the entire world. As tensions continue to evolve, the future of the Strait of Hormuz will remain a key determinant of whether the conflict moves toward resolution or further escalation. The military escalation between the United States and Iran in the wake of the April 2026 naval blockade represents one of the most dangerous and complex dimensions of the conflict. Unlike purely economic or diplomatic confrontations, military escalation introduces immediate risks of direct combat miscalculation and rapid regional expansion. As both nations increase their military presence in and around the Persian Gulf, the situation becomes increasingly volatile, with even minor incidents carrying the potential to spiral into a broader LHRB war. At the center of this escalation is the deployment of naval forces. The United States, maintaining one of the most powerful naval fleets in the world, has positioned aircraft carriers, destroyers, and support vessels in strategic locations near Iranian waters. These deployments are not only meant to enforce the blockade, but also to demonstrate power and deterrence. Aircraft carriers, in particular, serve as floating military bases capable of launching airstrikes, conducting surveillance, and supporting a wide range of lemlit-laskria military operations. The presence of such assets sends a clear message of readiness and capability, signaling that the United States is prepared for both defensive and offensive scenarios. On the other side, Iran has adopted a strategy that leverages its geographical advantages and asymmetric warfare capabilities. While it may not match the United States in conventional military strength, Iran possesses a range of tools designed to counter larger forces effectively. These include fast attack boats, coastal missile systems, naval mines, and submarines, all of which can be deployed in the narrow and strategically critical waters of the Strait of Hormuz. This approach allows Iran to create significant disruption without engaging in direct large-scale naval battles, making the conflict more unpredictable and difficult to control. A key element of this military escalation is the increased likelihood of direct encounters between naval forces. With both sides operating in close proximity, the risk of accidental clashes rises significantly. For instance, a misinterpreted maneuver, a warning shot, or an attempt to intercept a vessel could quickly escalate into a firefight. In such a tense environment, decision-making windows are extremely short, and commanders on the ground, or rather at sea, must act rapidly, often with limited information. This creates a KHTR risk of unintended escalation, where neither side initially intends to start a LHRB but becomes drawn into one due to rapidly unfolding events. Air power also plays a crucial role in this escalation. The United States has deployed advanced fighter jets, reconnaissance aircraft, and drones to monitor Iranian activities and maintain illustrious control over the LMNT-QHE region. These aircraft conduct surveillance missions, gather intelligence, and provide real-time data to naval commanders. Iran, in response, has strengthened its air LDFA defense systems and increased patrols to protect its airspace. The presence of multiple aircraft from opposing sides in a confined airspace adds another layer of complexity, where even a minor violation or misunderstanding could lead to aerial engagement. Missile capabilities further intensify the situation. Iran has developed a range of ballistic and cruise missiles capable of targeting ships, military bases, and infrastructure across the region. These missiles serve as a powerful deterrent, signaling that any attack on Iran could be met with significant retaliation. The United States, aware of this threat, has deployed missile defense systems and enhanced its readiness to intercept incoming attacks. This constant state of preparedness contributes to an atmosphere of high tension, where both sides remain on alert for any signs of aggression. Another dimension of military escalation involves cyber warfare and electronic operations. Modern conflicts are no longer limited to physical LMWJHT confrontations. They also extend into the digital realm. Both the United States and Iran possess cyber capabilities that can be used to disrupt communication systems, navigation networks, and critical infrastructure. For example, targeting shipping navigation systems could create confusion in busy maritime routes, while attacks on military communication networks could hinder coordination and response efforts. These non-kinetic operations add a hidden layer of conflict that operates alongside traditional military actions. Regional dynamics also play a significant role in amplifying military escalation. Neighboring countries in the Gulf region, including Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have heightened their own military readiness in response to the Luzma crisis. These nations, many of which are aligned with the United States, host military bases and provide logistical support. This creates a broader security network, but also increases the number of multilateral actors involved, raising the stakes and complexity of the conflict. Any attack on these allied nations or their assets could trigger a wider regional war, drawing multiple countries into the confrontation. The role of non-state actors and proxy forces adds another layer of complexity. Iran has historically maintained relationships with various groups across the Middle East, which can act as extensions of its strategic influence. In times of heightened tension, these groups may engage in actions that align with Iran's interests, such as targeting shipping routes or military installations. This indirect form of engagement allows Iran to exert pressure without direct confrontation, complicating the United States' response and blurring the lines of accountability. Logistics and supply chains are also critical in sustaining military operations. The United States relies on a vast network of bases, supply ships, and allied LDM support to maintain its presence in the region. Ensuring the steady flow of fuel, ammunition, and equipment is essential for prolonged operations. Iran, meanwhile, focuses on defending its territory and leveraging shorter supply lines within its own borders. This difference in logistical strategies highlights the contrasting approaches of a global military power versus a regional Qua power defending its immediate interests. The psychological aspect of military escalation should not be overlooked. The presence of heavily armed forces, constant surveillance, and the looming threat of conflict create an environment of DGT pressure for both military personnel and political leaders. Decisions made under such conditions can be influenced by stress, misinterpretation, or the desire to demonstrate strength. Public messaging and media coverage further shape perceptions, sometimes amplifying tensions and reducing the space for de-escalation. Technological advancements also influence the nature of this escalation. The use of drones, artificial intelligence, and surveillance and precision-guided munitions has transformed modern warfare. These technologies enable more accurate targeting and real-time decision-making, but also increase the SRU's speed at which conflicts can escalate. A single drone strike or missile launch can trigger immediate retaliation, leaving little room for diplomatic intervention. Naval mine warfare is another significant factor in this context. Iran has the capability to deploy mines in strategic locations within the Strait of Hormuz and surrounding waters. Even a limited number of mines can disrupt shipping lanes, as vessels must proceed with extreme caution or halt operations entirely. Clearing these mines is a complex and time-consuming process, requiring specialized equipment and exposing naval forces to additional risks. The threat of mines alone can have a significant psychological and economic impact, even if they are not actively deployed. Communication channels between the two nations, or the lack thereof, play a crucial role in managing escalation. In some conflicts, direct lines of communication help prevent misunderstandings and allow for quick clarification of intentions. However, strained relations and limited diplomatic engagement between the United States and Iran reduce the effectiveness of such mechanisms. This increases the likelihood that actions may be misinterpreted, leading to unintended consequences. The rules of engagement for military forces in the region are also a critical factor. These rules determine how and when forces can respond to perceived threats. In a highly tense environment, even defensive actions can be viewed as aggressive, triggering SLS chain reaction of responses. Commanders must balance the need to protect their QWT forces with the DRDRI necessity of avoiding unnecessary escalation, a task that becomes increasingly difficult as tensions rise. The economic cost of military escalation is another important consideration. Maintaining a large-scale military presence in the region requires substantial financial resources. For the United States, this includes the TKLFY cost of deploying and sustaining naval fleets, aircraft, and personnel. For Iran, the focus is on mobilizing and maintaining its defensive capabilities under conditions of economic pressure. These costs add to the broader economic impact of the conflict, influencing domestic priorities and long-term strategic planning. The potential for escalation into other domains, such as space and satellite operations, also exists. Modern military forces rely heavily on satellite systems for communication, navigation, and intelligence. Disrupting these systems could have significant consequences for both military and civilian activities. While such actions represent a more advanced stage of conflict, their possibility adds another layer of complexity to the overall situation. Human factors, including training, morale, and discipline, play a crucial role in how military forces operate under TNV tension. Well-trained personnel are better equipped to handle high-pressure situations and make measured decisions. However, prolonged periods of alertness and uncertainty can take a toll, increasing the likelihood of errors or overreactions. Leadership at all levels must work to maintain professionalism and prevent incidents that could escalate the conflict. Environmental conditions in the region also influence military operations. The waters of the Persian Gulf are characterized by high temperatures, limited visibility at times, and heavy maritime traffic. These factors can complicate navigation, surveillance, and coordination, adding to the challenges faced by naval forces. Operating in such conditions requires a high MS2 level of skill and adaptability. The interplay between military escalation and political decision-making is constant and dynamic. Actions taken on the battlefield or at sea often have immediate political implications, influencing public opinion and diplomatic strategies. Conversely, political decisions shape military objectives and rules of engagement. This Zymosvia's interconnection ensures that the conflict remains fluid, with developments in one area quickly affecting others, as both the United States and Iran continue to build up their military presence and capabilities in the region. The MS2 level of tension remains high, with each side carefully monitoring the other's moves. The combination of advanced technology, strategic geography, and competing interests creates a highly volatile environment where the margin for error is extremely small and the consequences of miscalculation could be far-reaching. The failure of diplomatic efforts between the United States and Iran represents a critical turning point in the escalation that led to the naval blockade of April 2026. Diplomacy has historically been the primary mechanism through which tensions between nations are managed, de-escalated, and, ideally, resolved. However, in this case, repeated attempts at dialogue, negotiation, and mediation have fallen short, creating a vacuum that has increasingly been filled by military and economic strategies. This breakdown is not the result of a single failed meeting, but rather the culmination of years of mistrust, conflicting objectives, and shifting geopolitical priorities. At the heart of this diplomatic failure lies a deep-rooted lack of trust between the two nations. Relations between the United States and Iran have been strained for decades, shaped by historical events, ideological differences, and opposing regional interests. Each side views the other with skepticism, often interpreting actions through a lens of suspicion rather than cooperation. This trust deficit makes it extremely difficult to reach agreements, as even small concessions are perceived as potential vulnerabilities. Negotiations, therefore, become less about finding common ground and more about protecting national interests and avoiding perceived losses. One of the central issues that has hindered diplomatic progress is the disagreement over Iran's nuclear program. The United States has consistently pushed for stricter limitations and monitoring, arguing that such measures are necessary to prevent the development of nuclear weapons. Iran, on the other hand, maintains that its nuclear activities are for peaceful purposes and asserts its right to pursue technological advancement. These opposing positions create a fundamental divide that is difficult to bridge. Even when partial agreements are reached, disagreements over implementation, verification, and compliance often lead to renewed tensions. Another significant factor contributing to the collapse of diplomacy is the role of sanctions and economic pressure. The United States has frequently used economic sanctions as a tool to influence Iran's behavior, targeting key sectors such as energy, banking, and trade. While these measures are intended to bring Iran to the negotiating table, they also create resentment and resistance. From Iran's perspective, negotiating under the pressure of sanctions can be seen as coercion rather than genuine dialogue. This dynamic complicates diplomatic efforts, as each side questions the intentions and sincerity of the other. The role of regional politics further complicates diplomatic engagement. The Middle East is a highly complex and interconnected region where conflicts and alliances often overlap. Iran's relationships with various regional actors and its influence in neighboring countries are viewed by the United States and its allies as a source of instability. Conversely, Iran perceives the presence and alliances of the United States in the region as a threat to its sovereignty and security. These competing perspectives make it difficult to isolate specific issues for negotiation, as each discussion is influenced by a broader set of regional concerns. Attempts at mediation by third parties have also faced significant challenges. Countries such as Pakistan and Oman, along with international organizations, have at times sought to facilitate dialogue between the United States and Iran. While these efforts have occasionally led to temporary de-escalation or limited agreements, they have not resulted in lasting solutions. Mediators often struggle to balance the demands of both sides, and any perceived bias can undermine their effectiveness. Additionally, the complexity of the issues at hand means that even well-intentioned mediation efforts can quickly become bogged down in LTF-SOL details. Communication barriers also play a role in the failure of diplomacy. Direct communication channels between the United States and Iran are limited, and much of the interaction occurs through intermediaries or public statements. This indirect communication can lead to misunderstandings, misinterpretations, and delays in response. In high-stakes situations where timing and clarity are crucial, such limitations can exacerbate tensions rather than resolve them. The absence of consistent and reliable communication channels reduces the ability of both sides to manage crises effectively. Domestic political pressures within both countries further constrain diplomatic efforts. In the United States, foreign policy decisions are often influenced by internal political dynamics, public opinion, and the positions of different political groups. Similarly, in Iran, leadership must consider domestic expectations, national pride, and political factions when engaging in negotiations. These internal factors can limit the flexibility of negotiators, making it difficult to compromise or adjust positions. Leaders may be reluctant to make concessions that could be perceived as weakness, even if such concessions could lead to a broader agreement. The role of timing and sequencing in negotiations is another critical aspect. Successful diplomacy often requires careful planning, with each step building on previous agreements. However, in the case of U.S.-Iran relations, disagreements over the order of actions, such as whether sanctions should be lifted before or after compliance measures, have repeatedly stalled progress. Each side seeks assurances before taking significant steps, leading to a stalemate where neither is willing to move first. Mistrust is further reinforced by past experiences where agreements have not been sustained. When previous deals collapse or are not fully implemented, it creates a sense of uncertainty about the value of future agreements. Both sides may question whether commitments will be honored over the long term, reducing the incentive to invest in new negotiations. This cycle of agreement and breakdown contributes to a broader sense of instability and unpredictability in diplomatic relations. The influence of global powers and alliances also shapes the diplomatic landscape. Other countries and international actors often have their own interests in the outcome of U.S.-Iran relations. Some may support efforts to reduce tensions, while others may prioritize strategic advantages. This external involvement can complicate negotiations as it introduces additional variables and competing agendas. Diplomatic efforts must navigate not only bilateral issues, but also a broader network of international relationships. Economic considerations are closely tied to diplomatic strategies. While sanctions are used as a tool to encourage negotiation, they also create economic conditions that can harden positions. Economic hardship within Iran may increase pressure on its leadership, but it can also strengthen resistance to external demands. Similarly, economic interests in the United States and among its allies influence policy decisions, shaping the approach to negotiations and the SRWT conditions placed on any potential agreements. The shift from diplomacy to military and economic measures, such as the Naval Blockade, reflects a broader change in strategy. When diplomatic efforts fail to produce desired outcomes, nations may turn to alternative methods to achieve their objectives. This shift can create a feedback loop, where increased pressure leads to further resistance, reducing the likelihood of returning to negotiations. As tensions rise, the space for diplomacy narrows, and the focus shifts toward managing conflict rather than resolving it. Public perception and media narratives also play a role in shaping diplomatic outcomes. How events are portrayed in the media can influence public opinion, which in turn affects political decision-making. Strong rhetoric and negative portrayals of the opposing side can make it more difficult to build the trust necessary for successful negotiations. Leaders may feel compelled to adopt more KTCHR hardline positions to align with public sentiment, further limiting the возможности possibilities for compromise. Cultural and ideological differences add another layer of complexity to diplomatic engagement. The United States and Iran have distinct political systems, values, and mirovozhrenia worldviews, which influence how they approach negotiations and interpret each other's actions. These differences can lead to misunderstandings and misaligned expectations, making it harder to find mutually acceptable solutions. Crisis management mechanisms, which are often used to prevent escalation during periods of tension, are less effective in the absence of strong diplomatic relations. Without established frameworks for dialogue and conflict resolution, incidents are more likely to escalate. The lack of such mechanisms in U.S.-Iran relations increases the risk that disputes will be handled through unilateral actions rather than coordinated efforts. The accumulation of these factors, mistrust, conflicting objectives, regional dynamics, domestic pressures, and communication barriers, creates a complex environment in which diplomacy struggles to succeed. Each failed attempt at negotiation reinforces the challenges. making subsequent efforts even more difficult. As a result, the reliance on non-diplomatic measures continues to grow, shaping the trajectory of the conflict and influencing the strategies of both nations. The global economic and political impact of the U.S. naval blockade on Iranian ports in April 2026 extends far beyond the immediate confrontation between the United States and Iran. In an increasingly interconnected world, regional conflicts, especially those involving major energy corridors, have widespread consequences that affect economies, governments, and populations across continents. The blockade has triggered a chain reaction influencing global markets, geopolitical alignments, and international stability, making it one of the most consequential developments in recent times. One of the most immediate and visible effects of the blockade is the disruption of global oil markets. A significant portion of the world's oil supply originates from the Persian Gulf, and much of it passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Any threat to this supply route creates uncertainty, which directly impacts oil prices. Even the anticipation of reduced supply can cause prices to surge as markets react to perceived risks. Higher oil prices, in turn, affect transportation, manufacturing, and energy costs worldwide. For oil-importing countries, particularly developing economies, this can lead to inflation, increased production costs, and slower economic growth. The ripple effects of rising energy costs extend into nearly every sector of the global economy. Industries that rely heavily on fuel, such as aviation, shipping, and logistics, face increased operational expenses, which are often passed on to consumers. This results in higher prices for goods and services, contributing to a broader inflationary environment. For households, this means increased costs of living, from higher fuel prices at the pump to more expensive food and consumer goods. Governments may be forced to adjust policies such as subsidies or interest rates to manage these economic pressures. Global trade is another area significantly impacted by the blockade. The uncertainty in the region affects shipping routes and increases the cost of maritime transport. Insurance premiums for vessels operating near conflict zones rise sharply due to the elevated risk of attack or disruption. Shipping companies may choose to reroute their vessels to avoid the LMNTQHE region, leading to longer transit times and higher costs. These disruptions can create bottlenecks in global supply chains, affecting the availability of goods and delaying deliveries. In a world already sensitive to supply chain disruptions, such developments can have far-reaching consequences. Financial markets also respond rapidly to geopolitical tensions of this magnitude. Investors tend to move towards safer assets during periods of uncertainty, leading to fluctuations in stock markets, currency values, and commodity prices. The currencies of oil-exporting countries may strengthen due to higher oil prices, while those of oil-importing nations may weaken. Stock markets often experience volatility as investors react to changing economic conditions and geopolitical risks. Central banks and financial institutions must carefully monitor these developments and may adjust monetary policies to maintain stability. The political impact of the blockade is equally significant as it reshapes alliances and influences international relations. Countries around the world are forced to reassess their positions based on their economic interests, security concerns, and diplomatic priorities. Allies of the United States may support the blockade as part of a broader strategy to contain Iran, while others may call for restraint and dialogue to prevent escalation. Some nations may attempt to maintain neutrality, balancing their local relations with both sides to protect their economic and strategic interests. Emerging powers and major economies such as China and India are particularly affected due to their reliance on energy imports from the region. These countries may seek alternative energy sources or negotiate new trade agreements to mitigate the impact of disruptions. At the same time, they may play a more active role in diplomatic efforts to stabilize the situation, recognizing the global implications of prolonged conflict. This dynamic highlights how regional conflicts can influence global power structures and decision-making processes. International organizations also become more active during such crises. Institutions focused on economic stability, energy security, and conflict resolution may step in to facilitate dialogue, provide LDGM support, or coordinate responses among member states. However, their effectiveness often depends on the willingness of major powers to cooperate. In highly polarized situations, achieving consensus can be challenging, limiting the ability of these organizations to implement meaningful solutions. The blockade also has implications for energy diversification and long-term strategic planning. Countries affected by rising oil prices and supply disruptions may accelerate efforts to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels or diversify their energy sources. Investments in renewable energy, alternative fuels, and new technologies may increase as nations seek to enhance their energy security. While these changes may take time to materialize, the Lozmem crisis serves as a catalyst for rethinking energy policies and priorities. From a humanitarian perspective, the global impact includes indirect effects on populations already facing economic challenges. Rising food and fuel prices can disproportionately affect lower-income households, increasing inequality and social pressure within societies. Governments may face public dissatisfaction as economic conditions worsen, potentially leading to protests or political instability. In regions already experiencing conflict or economic hardship, these additional pressures can exacerbate existing challenges. Experience significant changes in response to the blockade. Countries may increase their military spending, enhance their naval capabilities, or strengthen alliances to protect their interests. This can lead to an arms buildup, further intensifying geopolitical tensions. The presence of additional military forces in sensitive regions increases the risk of incidents, creating a cycle of napряжение tension and response that is difficult to break. Information and media play a crucial role in shaping the global perception of the conflict. News coverage, analysis, and commentary influence how governments, businesses, and individuals understand the situation. Misinformation or biased reporting can exacerbate tensions, while accurate and balanced information can contribute to informed decision-making. The escalating speed at which information spreads in the digital age means that events in the Persian Gulf can have immediate global reactions. Environmental considerations are another important aspect of the global impact. Increased military activity and the potential for attacks on oil infrastructure raise the risk of ecological environmental damage. Oil spills, fires, or other incidents could have long-term effects on marine ecosystems and coastal communities. The environmental consequences of such events would add another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. The interconnected nature of modern economies means that the effects of the blockade are not isolated but rather cumulative. Economic disruptions in one region can influence production, consumption, and investment patterns elsewhere. Businesses must adapt to changing conditions, adjusting their strategies to manage risks and uncertainties. Governments, in turn, must balance domestic priorities with international responsibilities, navigating a complex and evolving landscape. In conclusion, the global economic and political impact of the U.S. naval blockade of Iranian ports extends far beyond the immediate conflict between the United States and Iran. It affects energy markets, disrupts global trade, influences financial systems, and reshapes international relations. The Al-Zemabi highlights the vulnerability of interconnected systems to regional instability and underscores the high importance of maintaining secure and open trade routes. As nations respond to these challenges, the situation continues to evolve, with outcomes that will likely shape the global economic and political order for years to come.